Acts 23, starting verse 11. But on the night immediately following, the Lord stood at his side and said, "Take courage, for as you have solemnly witnessed to my cause at Jerusalem, so you must witness at Rome also." And when it was day, the Jews formed a conspiracy and bound themselves under an oath, saying that they would neither eat nor drink until they had killed Paul. And there was more than 40 who formed this plot. And they came to the chief priests and the elders and said, "We have bound ourselves under a solemn oath to taste nothing until we have killed Paul. Now, therefore, you and the council notify the commander to bring him down to you, as though you were going to determine his case by a more thorough investigation. And we, for our part, are ready to slay him before he comes near the place." But the son of Paul's sister heard of their ambush, and they came and entered the barracks and told Paul. And Paul called one of the centurions to him and said, "Lead this young man to the commander, for he has something to report to him." So he took him and led him to the commander and said, "Paul, the prisoner, called me to him and asked me to lead this young man to you, since he has something to tell you." And the commander took him by the hand and, stepping aside, began to inquire to him privately, "What is it that you have to report to me?" And he said, "The Jews have agreed to ask you to bring Paul down tomorrow to the council, as though they were going to inquire somewhat more thoroughly about him. So do not listen to them, for more than 40 of them are lying in wait for him, who have bound themselves under a curse not to eat or drink until they slay him. And now they are ready and waiting for the promise from you." Therefore the commander let the young man go, instructing him, "Tell no one that you have notified me of these things." And he called to him 2 centurions and said, "Get 200 soldiers ready by the 3rd hour of the night to proceed to Caesarea, with 70 horsemen and 200 spearmen. They were also to provide mounts to put Paul on and bring him safely to Felix, the governor." And then we'll stop right there. Okay. Such intrigue, such drama.
Yeah. Just need the music.
No.
Okay. So we are still continuing this storyline of Paul upsetting the Jews, and the Jews wanting to kill him because they were highly offended that he would dare let Gentiles into the presence of God, if you will. How dare him? And so they're all up in arms. And Paul was in prison, is in prison.
The barracks.
The barracks, right? He's sort of in prison, right? House arrest might be a nicer way of saying it, maybe, I don't know. And we get to the point in last week's reading that Jesus had stood beside Paul and told him to cheer up or to take courage. He starts it's in red letters, so I know it's got to be Jesus right there. "Take courage, for as you have solemnly witnessed to my cause at Jerusalem, so you must witness at Rome also." So he's saying, this is not your end days. This is not the final thing here. I don't know why, as I was reading this just a few minutes ago, it just occurred to me, the position of the Lord in this verse. Mine says, stood at his side.
Yeah.
Okay, so it wasn't, my first, I guess my mental image at first was there was this voice on high, and coming down to him, but rather it was a presence right next to him.
Right.
And there's something about being right next to you when someone's talking to you or consoling you or whatever, as opposed to sending you a card or an email or a text message. There's something about being in the presence one-on-one.
I agree, but I wonder if usually when you think of face-to-face, you and I walk up to each other face-to-face to talk. And it's kind of on this, like that men's, or the marriage retreat at the end of the day, when women do that, when men are shoulder to shoulder and tend to talk while doing something and don't really look at each other.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
And I'm not saying it ties with that, but it's just that I'm wondering if he didn't see him, but heard a voice, but it was so close, like it was someone that was right next,
I don't know.
I don't know.
To stood at his side.
But it definitely, like you're saying, it's close
Yeah,
and,
Yeah.
yeah.
I would venture to say, if you do more research in that word, I would have to believe, because it's used many times, even in the Old Testament. I mean, we got to remember, the spiritual world did come into this world when God decided to manifest himself, whether the angels with Abraham. So I would take that word as stood, as you stood.
Yeah.
And you can go to when Eli became the prophet. He was a child. The word became and stood by him. Same word.
Yeah.
It's a physical. It's whatever we want to say. It's like the resurrection of Christ. It wasn't the same. It was different, but he was there. So I would take that word as. And then you know what's? I think we've kind of lost the supernatural of God in the West.
Yeah.
And we got to be careful of that. Go and read your Old Testament, and that was something they accepted. So don't put God in the box. I'll never do that again and say, well, he can't do this. Well, yeah, he can if he decides to.
Oh, yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. So I would take this as reading it stood as he was there. And I believe that because I think Paul needed that presence, because Paul had a rough life, y'all. I think the only thing that kept him warm was he did to see the risen Lord. I really believe that. Because I don't think he could have, I really doubt if he could have went on the way he did, but he did. So I would take that as face value.
So right after this is stated by the Lord, Luke kind of transitions a little bit. It's kind of like Act 5, scene 12 or whatever. We've kind of moved over to what's happening somewhere else. Or I can see it now. Meanwhile, at the encampment, so we have these guys. I don't like the way mine is worded. This is an example, where you want to write in your Bible and correct it, you know what I'm saying? But it says the Jews formed a conspiracy. The first implication is the entirety of population, the Jews. But that's not what this is. You've got to keep it in context. It was certain people who are Jew, okay? Not classify and group the Jews, right?
But they were the Pharisees or the Sadducees or that they
I'm
typically
sure,
have said.
although not identified here, I am pretty sure, based on what we have previously read, it's going to be this group of people here. It could be, remember the people that were following Paul in his ministry? Wherever he was going, they were there. It could also have been some of these folks as well. So I'm not sure exactly who they are, but there's 40 of them at least. Or like I'd like to say, 41, because it says as many as.
Just to add to his point, it's a great point. Right? I had an old Jewish guy tell me one time, and I never knew this. He was from Israel. He says there's many sects. It's just not the Pharisees and Sadducees you read the Old Testament. There's many sects. He said it's almost like, let's look at today we know Islam. Y'all, there's many sects of Islam. He said the only reason why the Jews didn't kill themselves was because the Muslims banded together to go after the Jews, and vice versa. One common cause. Well, this is what this banded together with the Pharisees, the Sadducees. It'll bring enemies together for one common cause. So I think that's what it says. Banded them together. People think the Jews were all one. No, bro, they had plenty of little sects. Look through you, boy, it's interesting.
Yeah. And I think also that the Pharisees and Sadducees knows they can't go kill somebody, but they know people. They have their people. It just magically happens when they mention it in certain crowds, And to me, this is those guys. It's not the ones that are out front with the robes and
These are the zealots.
These are the zealots. These are the ones that takes care of business behind the scenes,
Remember that there were these terrorists. We read about it a couple of weeks ago that were trying to overthrow Rome, and they would always cause riots, and they were the assassins, right? Because they would just kill Romans at whatever they wanted to. It's that kind of people here. Okay to kill. Didn't
in the name of God.
and then say
it's
that.
probably not the first time they've done something like this.
That's kind of where I'm heading towards. Is that so? The Jews formed a conspiracy. So obviously they know, or at least Luke is observing, that this is not legal, right? So that's why the conspiracy here.
You can't kill a Roman citizen.
Right, right.
That's what Paul
Regardless of
says.
whether you're a Jew or not, yeah.
You cannot kill a Roman citizen.
Yeah. And bound themselves under an oath. So, okay, obviously the word bound does not mean with ropes and they're going to, tie each other together, right? So what is this bound under an oath? What does that mean? I mean, I don't know if we do that today. Bound under an oath.
I think the military people do it today. I think
They
now
get rid
people
of
can
jail
kind
if they break those
of,
oaths.
I mean, for their oath with each other, I may hear them talk, and it's a special bond between military men. I haven't been in the military, but my dad was, and it's a special bond that they have together. So I can see the military probably
Okay,
be somebody to
so
speak on that.
It's an accountability
Yeah.
Accountability.
to another.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And if you don't carry it out, those in the group take care of you.
Right. As well as the, then this saying, which is got to be honestly the stupidest thing to say, if you think about it, saying that they would neither eat nor drink until they had killed all. So they only have 3 days, apparently, because you can only go about 3 days, right? I mean, without drinking, and I could just see them all weak and crepit at the third day. I'm gonna kill you. It just feels like a teenager or someone, making some crazy promise or threat, right? That's what it feels like to me here.
But and I'm not familiar with this one, but there's so many idioms and sayings and traditions of that time.
Sure.
And to me, I always thought this one as being like a hierarchy. It's like, it's not just a dare, it's a double dare.
No, not,
You know what I mean? It's that type of
Double dare.
thing, is that they have these different sayings and whatever. And this is like, guys, we're serious. We're not going to eat anything until we get this done, type thing. I don't think they had I think that's the way it was.
yeah.
Whether this was unique, who knows? I should have known.
I kind of feel like it's also a pressure tactic to the chiefs, priests, and elders, saying, "Hey, this is how serious we are. If you, we want you to do this. You're going to do this. Otherwise, you're gonna have problems with us." It's kind of let the word be passed so they can actually make this happen. Mutiny of sorts.
Right. 13, and they were there. Luke identifies there was more than 40 who formed the plot, and they came to the chief priests and the elders. So, were they going to the chief priests and elders for an okay, for permission?
It was probably more like Matt just said, where they were kind of going there to bully them up, throw their weight around.
Yeah. I could imagine 40 of them coming up to the chief's priests and
That's a big group.
it's a large
these days,
group. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Especially if they're all carrying swords.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
But they came to the chief council because the council's the one that had to go to the commander.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they had to be part of the plot.
That's part of that plot, right? Exactly. And is it me just reading too much into it that they just came to a select few, chief priests and elders, and not to the Sanhedrin, not 70, the 70, folks, but rather to just a few?
Well, the chief, the
Yeah.
guys in charge.
Right. I mean, it is chief priest, so I'm not sure if that's just a layer of several key individuals there and elders, but to me it just seems like a small group as opposed to the Sanhedrin.
Yeah,
Right.
this one commentary just said they were the dominant force on the Sanhedrin.
Right, yeah, the real political power of that group, yeah.
Whoever has the summoning authority to bring it back.
Right. Okay, yeah. So this group of 40 tells them we have bound ourselves under a certain oath to taste nothing till we kill Paul. And here's the conspiracy or the plot, or the plan, I should say. Now you and the council notify the commander to bring him down to you as though you were going to determine his case. So you imagine they're going to bring him down to in theory, a sort of isolated place where the Jews would meet, right, in the barracks area. And somehow that's where they would do the deed, if I could say it that way. Under this pretense of wanting to, let's just find out more, be open about it, have that pretense. And then 16, I put a little question mark, because that bothers me here. But the son of Paul's sister heard of their ambush. All right. So what do we know about Paul and his family? Nothing.
Outside of
He has a
his
sister.
mom and his dad.
Right, exactly.
That was about it.
Yeah, well, surely he had at least one mom and dad, at least at one
Right.
time. Had a sister. We're knowing that
We know
now.
that now.
And his sister had a baby.
And a nephew.
Thus
That's
the
right.
nephew.
Right. That's about it.
That's about it. There's little tidbits we get out of that. So other questions become, we're in Jerusalem. If Paul is from Tarsus, what is the son doing here? And why is he knowing this information that is in this group of stuff here?
Probably the Lord's plan.
Yep, probably.
Sure.
Providence.
Yep.
We constantly see that.
Yep.
Some of the practical possibilities would be, and it's not written in here, so this is just Howard's speculation, is that he's old enough to be in training to be a Pharisee, because Paul was a Pharisee of the Pharisees, right? He was a son of the Pharisee. So it's in the family here. So good chance that he's in Jerusalem, like Paul was in Jerusalem when he was younger, learning under the teachings. So that might be where he's at. Family lineage is important, you know.
He could be a houseboy, servant.
Could be.
But I like your idea, but I was thinking that.
Yeah, he could be. Somehow he was close enough to the group of these elders and chiefs or the 40 men. I'm not sure which one he was connected with,
Sure.
to hear of this plot that is going on. So he was in that, and how, why, I don't know.
My first impression was maybe he's a little Italian. He's got a bodyguard to help him, and his family's taking care of him.
Yeah, that could be said.
Yeah.
Kind of on that thing, even the chief priests, you know, they don't walk around by themselves. They have
An entourage?
an entourage.
Okay.
And they could be studying the Pharisees, but they're the junior, interns or whatever you want to call it.
right.
You know, just like in Congress where they have all these interns running around that are invisible because they're just, they're the furniture, don't worry about it,
Right.
Now, that could have been something like that where he was in training that falls in your line.
Right.
But being a junior, he's just
Right.
basically carrying the chief priest's bag, so to speak.
Right. The other option is that, Paul was a Roman citizen by birth, and his nephew goes into the barracks, the Roman barracks, to tell Paul himself. So it could be related through the Roman side of things.
Right, oh yeah,
Yeah.
could absolutely be from that side. We don't know.
We don't know.
I think the most interesting thing about this whole account is, if you step back and we look at God, why didn't God just say, okay, I'm going to get Paul out of there and walk in? You see, God uses man, and I think that's sometimes we forget we're part of God's plan.
Right.
Explaining that, as far as the way he works it all out, that's why I look at this account, and I think that's why I take more faith in God, because he uses man to fulfill his plan. This is a lot going on, and it's like, okay, why didn't he just say, "Look, let me get Paul out of there supernaturally"? It's done. Like the
Yeah.
angels with the barricade, get him out of there.
Right there in the red letters. There was the opportunity.
That's it. And I'm like, that's something the way God always works in the Bible. He uses man to fulfill his plan. I think that's for us, our benefit, to build our faith. I really believe that, So I think that's this whole account here. I hate to say story, I like to say account. The whole account. That's what just totally makes me look at it and go, God, look at this, the way he uses man to fulfill his plan.
And at the same time, you can't put him in a box and say that because he'll do stuff
Yes.
supernatural, like open prison doors.
Right.
That's right.
You know.
Explain that. You're right.
Yeah.
It's just, to me, mind-boggling.
And he told Paul the story here, what was happening. 17, and Paul called one of the centurions to him. Okay. He calls him, like, "Oh, centurion, come to my bid." Centurion is a leader of how many men?
100%.
Right? 100. So it's a fairly significant, level individual here. It's not like the
Well, wasn't-
guard, go get me,
But wasn't a centurion specifically tasked to guard Paul or stay with Paul or oversee
I don't remember exactly
It's
that.
important. Remember, Paul's a Roman citizen now.
Yeah.
Right.
So it carries away just what you just said. This centurion's job, you have to look at the Roman law. bro, when it became Romans and anybody else, that Roman person was
Well protected.
well protected, and it was this guy's responsibility. And if something happened to Paul or Roman citizens, all because they want to keep secure the nation, let's say.
Yeah.
Don't hurt a Roman. So again, we got to put things in perspective. Go back to
But I
it. He was
remember-
doing his job, yeah.
Somewhere in there, I don't remember where we read it, whoever charged the centurion to guard Paul, it was a centurion he talked to, the pilot, whoever
That's
it
right.
was. Told the centurion, now the centurion obviously has his 100 people
Yep.
Back them up.
to back him up,
Yeah.
but he's the guy in charge, so that's the guy that was told.
Yep.
So I think he had I hate to use the word personal relationship, but a conversation with Paul, because that's the guy, hey, you're gonna stay in his doors, you got that, type thing. So I think that would be Paul's point of contact if there's any issues.
So you don't think it's out of the ordinary that Paul would just call the centurion
I don't
over?
think so.
I don't think so. Not for the context. But now, if Paul, let's say Paul was a Jew, not a Roman, then I would say, oh yeah, we got to go there. But
Yeah.
Paul's a Roman citizen being protected, and you're right.
In the house arrest arrangement.
And the centurion was told, you take care of this man. Well, that's, if you go back and look at Roman law and all, that's protocol, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah.
But not like a, take care of him as in send him, serve him tea and crumpets.
Oh, no, I'm not saying that, no,
That
I'm
kind
talking
of
about
thing.
take care of, make sure nothing happens to him.
Because
Yeah,
what happens to Paul is the centurion's life
There
too.
you go,
Yeah.
that's
Okay.
right. He's
Alright.
got to explain it.
Yeah.
How did this Roman citizen die under your watch?
Yeah. It was the other centurion.
That's right.
It was that stone that rolled away. I don't know, it fell on him. I don't know what he did. So Paul then has this, well, Luke records it this way: lead this young man to the commander, for he has something to report to him. It almost sounds like a command. I don't really think it's a command as it is a, hey, would you take this kid over to there? More than I'm commanding you to do this. And that's why I was asking about, is the centurion a servant of Paul? That kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Here. So in 18, we see that he took him, that's the centurion, and led him to the commander and said, Paul the prisoner called to me. He's explaining why he's here and asked me to lead this young person to you since he has something to tell you. It's 19 then, I have another question mark. And the commander took him by the hand and stepping aside. Now this is a commander of centurions, right? Right?
Yeah.
So he's over potentially thousands of things. So he's a pretty big deal, right? Why this take him by the hand and pull him aside? Why is this?
The only thing that always got me, but I think it's a private conversation is the intent of that statement, as opposed to in a courtyard with 5 centurions and whatever. This is pulled them aside.
And again, this is not a play-by-play. We don't know what was actually said. Luke's just
Right.
paraphrasing everything. The centurion could have came and said, listen, there's some secretive stuff going on. You need to talk to this guy. I'm paraphrasing, but I don't think, we got to understand this. Luke is not there giving a play-by-play.
We
Yeah,
don't have- we don't
we're
have
getting an
the-
overview. We don't have
the
the
whole
intimate
conversation.
Exactly. So I think when we read this, we got to kind of put things in perspective that way. We got to kind of just say, okay, this is an overview. That's because I'm with you. We can't speculate on what this how. But I know if I went to Jay and had a private conversation, and Mickey's there, Mickey's going to say, okay, I'll write it down. But Mickey goes by memory. He's not going to write everything I said. He's just going to give you an overview. But if you talk to me and Jay will say, yeah, this is what John actually said. So I think we got to remember that. Give a little more space to what's written as far as that. More latitude.
So in 20, Paul's nephew says the Jews have agreed to ask you to come down tomorrow, and he basically explains the plot to him. 21, then the nephew says, so do not listen to them, and then explains more. For there's 40 of them are lying in wait, kind of like a lion waiting for you, have bound themselves under this, Mike says a curse. I didn't even catch that. Bound themselves under a curse. You have to curse?
Oath of mine.
Oath, yeah. That's what I thought it was. Okay.
Earlier, did yours say oath or did
It said oath before, yeah.
So
So,
it's
Well, I think
curse.
probably part of the
12.
oath was that if you don't do this,
you're cursed? Yeah.
you're cursed. So that's probably part of that accountability thing.
Well, but you know what? Here's the key. It's just as funny this should happen. Yesterday, I was listening to a nice talking about just what we're talking about. A lot of commentaries now, when they translate the Word of God, what they're doing is instead of oath and oath, the Bible does a lot of repetition, and a lot of these people who are translating it, they're kind of getting away from that, and what they're finding out is hurting the flow of the Word of God. And because of English culture, we don't like to do that. But if you go to the original text, I can guarantee it probably says oath and oath. And there's
They
in
just do-
Genesis
they just
1 and
do it.
11, it does the same thing.
They just do it to make it sound more
Exactly.
interesting.
Yeah.
And they're saying, and I wish I'll find it's between two scholars, and it's very interesting that they said the original text is, and that's because Hebrew is that way.
Right.
They do over again,
Right.
and it's to emphasize.
Right.
So I'm glad you mentioned that because it's really probably going to be oath and oath.
Yeah.
But through our translations, we say, oh no, that don't sound good. And what they're saying is actually opposite. Hebrew does it because God's emphasizing something.
Right, yeah.
So yeah, I'll find it and I'll send it to y'all. It's a great podcast and it's by our scholars.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Johnny, were you about to say something else?
Well, no, mine said curse in 12.
It did.
And oath
Yours-
in 21.
Oh, really?
Yep.
So it's flip-flop
Yep.
around. Not that the Word of God is flip-flopped. I'm not saying that. Interesting. Okay.
So they may lend it to tell you that it may be the same word.
Yeah,
Maybe,
it
yeah.
very well may
I'll
be.
have to look into it, but it'd be interesting to find out.
Yeah.
22, therefore the commander let the young man go, instructing him, hush, hush, don't tell anyone. 23 then, and he, this would be now the commander here, called to him 2 centurions and said, get 200 soldiers ready by the 3rd hour. 3rd hour. So what time is that? There's a Jewish
9 o'clock.
9 p.m. 6, remember 6? 6, 7, 8, and 9. Right? So
9
they're-
a.m. or p.m.?
PM. It'll be PM. Yeah. And because their day started at 6 p.m. That's the day start.
Right.
We think of it in the morning, but it's 6
It's
p.m.
at the sunset.
To sunset, right.
That's cool.
Okay. Kind of like we start our midnight is our day, beginning of the day.
Right.
Kind of that thing. We start 6 p.m. All right. So it's at night. This should feel familiar if you've been following Paul's journeys, because every time he has a riot and has to sneak out of town, they always sneak him out at night. It always seems to be that way. There's a practical thing in my head that I just can't get over. So they travel at night, but there's no street lamps. This is, they're on either foot or on horses, and I don't know about you guys, but walking at night, if you've walked in the country when it's really dark, right, it is a scary thing, because you don't know if that next step is a crevice, let alone a bug or some scorpion, kind of thing.
Well, I think at night, you didn't have, they didn't have a lot of trees, and there was enough moon
Moon and stars.
and stars, they don't have the light pollution we have.
I'm such a city boy, everything is black to me,
Yeah.
type of thing. So, what's the stars? I've never seen the stars. Okay, real quick. 3rd hour, so that's of the night, to proceed to Caesarea with 70 horsemen and 200 spearmen. So what is that? 470 people. I think the commander is serious about keeping Paul
Yeah.
safe. I think he's not joking
They
around.
can handle any 40,
Right.
any kind of ambush.
Yeah, exactly. If you think, all the physical descriptions that I've read about Paul's physical description, he is not some Arnold Schwarzenegger or kind of injured, but a short, stout little man is the descriptions that I hear about all the time. So there's all these guards just protecting this little guy here. So, strangeness here to me. And they also provided, mine says mounts, but horses, right? To put Paul on and bring him safely to Felix the governor. We're going to talk about Felix later here because we have to stop. Again, this whole area, this whole chapter, I keep coming to the word providence. God sets in motion things, as it said, you must be my witness at Rome also. That's what started all this. And this is how God is working that out. Makes me wonder how he's working in our lives right now, right? to me, I can easily look back and see how God has worked in my life here. And He's always working in our lives, whether we know it yet or not. Praise the Lord to that. I'd rather have a God work in my life, right? As opposed to just hope the idol would do the trick. What are you guys praying for?